question. If you take a time machine and go meet your 30-year-old you, and what advice would you give him?
If I could time travel back to myself, you mean, and give myself advice?
By yourself.
Ooh, there's so many situations, there are many mediations I would go back to and I'd recommend to myself to do something different. But if I would go back in time to a moment, I would go back to my very first training on mediation. My first training on mediation was by two great trainers, Gary Friedman and Bob Manukin. And it was a very short 2-day training. And I hated the training. And I did not like mediation. And I was probably the worst student they'd ever had. I was interrupting. I was rejecting things. I was opposing things. I was just very impatient, and I thought there's something wrong with what this process is about. So I was very resistant to mediation in the beginning. And if I would go back and advise myself, it would be shut up and listen. But that's advice I still try and tell myself today, and not always listening as well as I should.
It's quite fun. How did you reverse your view on mediation then?
So I did this training and I really did not like mediation. I was a litigator. I was doing trial litigation in America, courtroom, very aggressive litigation. And here I am told you can be in a room together, you can ask all sorts of questions. And, I just thought this is a waste of time. This is not what real lawyers do. And I kind of left there, but I found myself around 2 months later in a meeting. And as I was going into the meeting, I was given some new information that all of our case was worth nothing. We had just a terrible case, but just based on one new piece of information. And I had a big meeting with clients, and we were going to the meeting, and I had to conduct a very tough negotiation where I'd been prepared to say we got a really strong case, but with one piece of information, our case was very different. And so the clients, we were all in a panic because we're actually at the meeting place. We're preparing to walk in, and we haven't even had time to discuss this document, but we all know it's terrible. And I said, look, I have no idea what I'm going to do now, but we have to fill in the time. Let me try something. And I kind of went in, even though I was the lawyer for one of the parties, and I went in and said, look, we can talk about our cases, but we can always do that as lawyers. We can do that separately with her. Let's have a different conversation. Let me just ask you, and I didn't believe I was going to get an answer. Why don't you tell me more about your needs and interests? Look to the future, and I'll tell you a bit about my clients' needs and interests looking to the future. And I was just trying to buy time. I had an hour to have a meeting, and I had to buy the time. And I said, look, we're interested in this area, in this technology, in this field. This is why this case is so important to us. That's why we're so willing to fight this case, because this technology in the future is so important to us. And then the fascinating thing is that having asked about the needs and interests, they said, well, we didn't know that, because that's exactly the field that we are interested in as well for the future. And that's why we are not going to give up on this case either, because we think this field is really important. And what actually turned from that negotiation was a joint venture. It turned out they had technology and other ways of looking at that field that we'd partly resolved some of it, but we were encountering other problems. So we set up a joint venture, and none of us ever thought that would be the case walking into the room. I only asked the question because I was desperate. And so I kind of went back to the same training with Bob and Gary the next year with my tail between my legs. They looked at me and they said, what are you doing here again? I mean, they almost looked pale. It was like, oh my God, the nightmare student has come back. And I said, I'm here to listen this time. And I redid the training with them.
Oh, it's so sweet.
It was an interesting moment.
Welcome to the 6th episode of World Mediation Deacons. This is DK. I'm cathartic to have my guest today. His name is Bruce Edward. Bruce is one of the founders and board members of GEMS, and GEMS is the world's largest private alternative dispute resolution provider, which was founded in 1979. GEMS handles annually 18,000 cases on average. So he's the Zeus in ADR industry, as he created a whole new ecosystem in private ADR industry. In addition, a few years ago, along with his wife Susan, he founded Edwards Mediation Academy, an online education platform. Hello, Bruce. Welcome to the show.
Hello, DK. Pleasure to meet you and delighted to be here with your audience. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Could you introduce yourself, where you were born, raised, educated, and career path up to now? It's quite interesting. And one of other your articles, and your father told you the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Can you elaborate that story as well?
Yeah, my father had a lot of good expressions,